In the vast, glimmering expanse of Langston Innovations, where glass walls reflected ambition like mirrors, Elijah Hayes moved silently with his maintenance cart, unnoticed yet purposeful. At 58, he was a man who had once commanded the frontier of artificial intelligence, now reduced to tending to leaking pipes and flickering lights, while the CEO, Clayton Riker, barely spared him a glance. Inside the top floors, executives murmured in urgency over a prototype vehicle that refused to behave, oblivious to the presence of the man who had once shaped the very technology they wrestled with. When Clayton's latest pride and joy, a gleaming silver vehicle, stalled spectacularly in the company lot, his sneer accompanied by a taunt, "Fix this, and it's yours," was meant to belittle. But for Elijah, it became the turning point where the invisible hand of genius revealed itself, quietly reclaiming a brilliance long ignored and dismissed. Before we dive deeper, tell me where you're watching from, and if you love stories like this, hit subscribe. It keeps these tales coming. Elijah's morning began long before the city stirred. Chicago's skyline was still shadowed, the streets nearly empty, when he entered Langston Innovations with steady, deliberate steps. His salt and pepper beard framed a calm, measured expression, and his presence carried an understated dignity. Bill, the security guard, offered a nod and a smile. "Morning, Elijah." "Early again." "Early is when the work gets done right," Elijah replied, his tone carrying the quiet weight of a lifetime. The building, a towering monument to intellect and innovation, was usually buzzing by 8, but these quiet hours reminded him of a world that once acknowledged his mind. He changed into his navy blue maintenance uniform, hung his worn tweed jacket with care, and set out, his name tag reading simply Elijah, a label that minimized his existence, yet never diminished his competence. By the time the clock in, the lobby blinked past 6:30. He had already corrected problems others deemed unsolvable or simply ignored. A flickering light in the women's restroom on the 18th floor had gone unnoticed for weeks. Sarah from accounting had filed a request, yet no one had acted. With deft hands, Elijah replaced the ballast. The printer on the 22nd floor jammed repeatedly, and 2 IT technicians had declared it broken. Elijah, however, saw the simple cause: a tiny metal tab slightly bent out of alignment. With precision and patience, he corrected it, leaving no note, claiming no credit. The executive kitchen faucet, dripping steadily, was tightened and wiped spotless before anyone could arrive. These small acts went unnoticed, forming the silent backbone of a functioning building, much like Elijah himself, essential yet invisible. As the morning unfolded, the building awakened. Engineers with coffee rushed past him, analysts in sharp suits barely spared him a glance. Elijah blended into the scenery, a fixture as unnoticed as potted plants and emergency exit signs. Then, a ripple of commotion heralded the arrival of Clayton Riker. 43, meticulously styled, sculpted by expensive trainers and sartorial precision, Clayton carried an aura of unearned invincibility. "Morning, team," he called, eyes fixed on his phone, voice perfectly polished. 3 executives trailing like dutiful shadows. Elijah adjusted his cart, stepping aside, yet remained attentive. Clayton's focus never wavered, even as he lectured a subordinate on supply chain. Delays, a misstep, a wet floor, and Elijah's hand shot out instinctively, steadying the CEO before disaster could strike. Coffee splashed harmlessly onto the floor, a minor disaster averted, and Clayton barely registered it beyond a fleeting look of impatience. "Watch where you're cleaning," he muttered, dismissing Elijah's presence as he strode past, leaving a sting of unacknowledged competence in his wake. Later, outside a conference room, raised voices debated intricate technical problems. Phrases like recursive loops and algorithmic failure pierced Elijah's ears. words that once would have been second nature to him. The prototype vehicle, the same one failing in the lot, was the subject of their frustration. He lingered, absorbing the conversation, recognizing flaws immediately, recalling solutions long buried in memory. A young engineer, Zoe Mitchell, approached him with curious eyes. Her badge identified her as an intern, yet something about her gaze suggested she sensed more than a janitor. Elijah smiled faintly and moved his cart aside, deflecting her attention. But her curiosity lingered, unspoken questions echoing silently as he continued his rounds. By midday, Elijah moved quietly through the 32nd floor, executing repairs that went unnoticed. A jammed elevator button drew his attention. Engineers had attempted fixes without success. With practiced hands, he opened his tool pouch, applied a delicate touch, and restored functionality within minutes. When Zoe appeared, surprised, he offered only a modest shrug. "Simple wiring issue," he said. Her gratitude carried a weight of genuine recognition, a rarity in a world that overlooked him. The quiet evening hours were his sanctuary, when the harsh glare of fluorescent lights softened, and he could navigate the building with a semblance of freedom. He entered the R&D lab, officially off-limits, where prototypes blinked in half-finished glory. Security, long accustomed to his after-hours presence, offered a silent nod. Here, among blinking monitors and scattered diagrams, Elijah moved with reverence, tracing wiring patterns, examining circuit boards, consulting a leather-bound notebook filled with sketches and calculations far ahead of anything on the lab screens. The following day, whispers began. Zoe sought answers from HR and security, piecing together fragments of Elijah's enigmatic history. He was reliable, solitary, consistent, yet there were gaps in every story. He was the janitor who seemed to hold secrets beyond comprehension, a figure quietly threading the invisible pulse of Langston Innovations. People noticed, yet none fully grasped the depth beneath the uniform. And then came the moment that shifted perception entirely. Clayton's custom prototype vehicle refused to start, stranded in the parking lot as engineers floundered. Clayton, face red with frustration, berated his team for failing what should have been a routine task. Elijah, sweeping nearby, observed silently, a calm presence amid chaos. The CEO, sensing a potential opportunity to humiliate, called out mockingly, challenging him to fix what no one else could. Laughter rippled through the crowd, doubt heavy in the air. Elijah's hands, worn and steady, moved with unshakable confidence. He leaned over the complex engine, tracing wires, adjusting components with a gentle precision. Moments later, the ignition hummed, the vehicle alive with green lights and perfect operation. Silence enveloped the parking lot, awe replacing mockery. And in that instant, invisibility shattered, revealing a brilliance that had never truly dimmed. Every face around the sleek silver prototype reflected disbelief, but none more sharply than Clayton's. His laughter, once confident and mocking, faltered and vanished entirely. The soft, steady hum of the engine filled the sudden stillness, a quiet testament to skill that defied expectation. Clayton's expression shifted rapidly. Shock, confusion, a forced mask of dismissal. "Must have been luck," he muttered, snapping the hood shut, his voice betraying the slightest tremor. Engineers exchanged glances, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. This was no ordinary fix. Multiple critical errors had blinked on the diagnostic screens, issues that should have immobilized the vehicle for hours. Yet Elijah simply nodded, returned to his broom, and muttered under his breath, "Just needed the right touch." The subtle ripple of change spread almost immediately. As colleagues dispersed, lingering glances of renewed curiosity followed him. Zoe, observing from the entrance, discreetly captured the moment on her phone, fascinated by the quiet mastery she had just witnessed. By lunchtime, whispers had traversed the cafeteria like wildfire. Groups clustered, stealing glances at the man quietly cleaning tables in the corner. "Did you see that in the lot?" one voice murmured. "The janitor just fixed the prototype like magic." Others nodded, incredulous. Even Clayton's aura of invincibility seemed punctured by the unmistakable proof of talent hidden in plain sight. Within 2 days, the clip had made its way onto social media. Zoe had shared it privately at first, yet someone posted it publicly. The caption read, "Janitor fixes CEO's $3 million prototype like it's a toaster." Views surged, 50,000 in mere hours. And by evening, the story spread to LinkedIn, eliciting awe and respect from tech professionals worldwide. Comments praised humility and the often hidden talent within overlooked employees, a digital chorus validating what the company's hierarchy had ignored. By Monday, the air at Langston Innovations had shifted. Smiles, nods, even casual greetings flowed toward Elijah from corners that had previously ignored him. Engineers who once averted their gaze now offered tentative acknowledgments. In the elevator, a young software developer extended her hand. "I'm Amanda," she said. "That was impressive, what you did with the prototype." Elijah accepted the gesture with a modest smile. "Just a simple fix," he said, understatement, coloring every word. The elevator doors closed before she could probe further, leaving the question lingering in the air. Later, a message summoned him to HR. Dana awaited him, flanked by James Porter, the head of security, who regarded him with a silent, authoritative weight. "Please sit," Dana instructed, her voice controlled, almost neutral. A document slid. Across the desk, a formal warning notice. "Security footage shows you in R&D after hours," James said. "Restricted areas only." Elijah glanced at the paper calmly. "I was checking the ventilation system," he replied evenly. Dana shook her head. "That's not your designated responsibility. Your contract explicitly limits your access." Elijah signed without argument, a quiet nod acknowledging the rules, but the look in his eyes carried a subtle defiance, a flame, that neither authority nor reprimand could extinguish. Meanwhile, Zoe's fascination deepened. Her initial curiosity grew into a methodical investigation. Between classes, she scoured academic databases, online archives, and journals, hunting for traces of Elijah's history. Social media revealed nothing. Professional profiles yielded silence. But in the dusty corners of scholarly publications, she found him. A 1992 paper on adaptive learning algorithms in automotive navigation systems, authored by Elijah J. Hayes at MIT. Further digging unearthed patents, conference presentations, and research spanning the late 80s through the 90s. Then, nothing. By 2002, Elijah had vanished from professional life, leaving only whispers and an unfinished legacy. A single newspaper clipping offered a clue, a whistleblower raising safety concerns about AI at Tech Dynamics. No name, only context, yet the timing matched Elijah's disappearance perfectly. The pieces fell into place slowly for Zoe, forming the outline of a story hidden behind decades of silence. That afternoon, she found him in the lobby, cleaning windows. Approaching cautiously, she called, "Mr. Hayes, may I speak with you privately?" Elijah paused, studying her, wary yet receptive. "Something wrong with the elevators?" he asked, lightly. "No," she replied. "It's about MIT and Tech Dynamics." His expression hardened briefly, but he nodded toward a quiet corner. Once away from prying ears, Zoe's voice dropped to a whisper. "You were a mechanical engineer. MIT. Published papers on adaptive learning decades before anyone else. What happened? Why are you here cleaning floors instead of leading R&D?" Elijah's response was soft, tinged with the weight of memory. "Life takes unexpected turns, Miss Mitchell. Zoe, please." His sigh carried sorrow and resolve. He shared a story of personal loss. A younger brother, Marcus, an AI system gone awry, ignored safety safeguards, and a tragedy that could never be undone. Public warnings he issued about flawed systems had blacklisted him, cutting him off from a career he had once loved. I couldn't get hired anywhere, he admitted. Eventually, I stopped trying, took whatever work I could find. But I still love the craft, even if from the sidelines. Their conversation was interrupted by an unmistakable storm. Clayton. Riker, furious, storming the lobby, his face thunderous, IT staff in tow. "That video," he bellowed. "Every copy, every trace, gone, now!" His gaze fixed on Elijah, narrowing like a predator spotting its prey. Moments later, Elijah found himself standing before Clayton's expansive desk on the 40th floor. Chicago sprawled beneath panoramic windows, but all focus was on the man who had once been invisible, the janitor whose hands had just reminded everyone what brilliance looked like when quietly unleashed. "That video has gone viral, over 1 million views," Clayton said, voice tight, almost trembling with restrained fury. "The board has been calling non-stop all weekend. They want answers. Why a janitor can solve problems our engineers can't touch. My leadership is being questioned. My decisions, my talent management, everything." Elijah stood silent, the calm in his posture a stark contrast to the storm, swirling across the CEO's face. Clayton leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "So tell me, Hayes, who are you really? Just a man doing his job, sir?" Clayton's laugh cut sharp, humorless. "No," he said, pacing slowly around the massive desk, closing in uncomfortably. "I dug into your background after that little stunt with the car. You're not just anyone." He stopped, leaning over, the polished surface, voice lowering with a mixture of threat and intrigue. "Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow, you're going to fix a real problem. One that's been stalling our self-learning vehicle for months. Solve it, and I'll triple your pay." His sneer dripped with disbelief, the certainty that Elijah's first success had been a fluke. Elijah considered the offer, his eyes calm and measured. "I'll need the schematics," he said. "The real ones, not the simplified versions your team uses for presentations." Clayton's brow arched at the confidence, surprise flickering before suspicion returned. "And I want Zoe in the room," Elijah added quietly. Clayton's gaze sharpened. "The intern? Why?" "She asks the right questions," Elijah replied evenly. Clayton's eyes narrowed, then he nodded curtly. "Fine. Tomorrow 9 a.m., main R&D lab. You'll have the schematics and your assistant. But fail, Hayes, and back to mopping floors. No more viral fame. No more pretending you're an engineer." Elijah nodded once. "Understood." As he turned, Clayton called after him, voice carrying both warning and command. "One more thing. Remember, the board is watching. Don't embarrass me again." In the small maintenance closet that doubled as his break room, Elijah sat with his worn leather notebook open, pages filled. With algorithms, sketches, and designs decades ahead of Langston's current tech stared back at him. Tomorrow he would return to a real lab for the first time in nearly 20 years. A thrill mixed with a familiar apprehension stirred in his chest. His phone buzzed, a text from Zoe. "Just heard about tomorrow. What's the plan?" Elijah's fingers hovered over the screen before typing back a simple message. "Time to remember who I was." That evening, after the building emptied, Elijah stood in the dimly lit parking garage, staring at the silver prototype that had turned everything upside down. His reflection shimmered across the polished metal, distorted yet familiar. 2 decades of invisibility had kept him in the shadows, but tomorrow, the world would see him again. Another buzz from his phone, a notification. The viral video had just crossed 5 million views. Morning light spilled into the R&D lab as Elijah entered for the first time during business hours. The space was alive with focused energy. Engineers, hunched over monitors, simulations running, quiet discussions peppering the room. Heads turned immediately as he stepped through the doorway, his Navy maintenance uniform standing in sharp contrast to lab coats and casual tech attire. Zoe waited by the main conference table, her encouraging smile steadying the tension. "Morning, Mr. Hayes," she called clearly enough for others to hear. "Just Elijah is fine," he replied quietly. A tall engineer with graying temples approached, hand extended. "Dr. Hayes, I'm Wilson Gardner. I read your paper on predictive algorithmic patterns in grad school. It completely reshaped my programming approach." Before Elijah could reply, Clayton entered, flanked by two executives, visibly unsettled by the reception. "Let's get started," he barked. "I don't have all day for experiments." Wilson retreated, giving Elijah a subtle nod of respect. On the conference table lay a stack of schematics and tablets. Clayton gestured impatiently. "The algorithm relates to our self-learning vehicle's decision-making under unexpected road conditions," he said, tone loaded with challenge and disbelief. Elijah lifted the top schematic, scanning the diagrams with precision honed over decades. 25 years might have passed, but the language of engineering remained second nature. After a long pause, he spoke. "You've got a recursion problem." Clayton snorted dismissively. "Yes, that's what we're aware of. That's why you're here. To fix it." Elijah spread 3 schematics across the table. "It's not just recursion. Your system is feeding unfiltered data loops back into the decision matrix. At high speeds, this could cause the vehicle to lose control, potentially catastrophically." A murmur swept through the room. One young engineer whispered to a colleague, "Exactly what I've been saying for months." Clayton's face flushed, with irritation. Elijah's voice remained calm. "May I?" he asked Zoe, gesturing to the workstation. For the next hour, he worked with methodical precision, explaining each step to her, while his fingers danced across the keyboard with surprising dexterity for a man supposedly spent with a mop. "See here," he said, pointing to a line of code. "They overcomplicated safety protocols. Simplicity can be more effective. A brief delay in the feedback loop allows proper data validation." Zoe absorbed every word, her questions reflecting sharp intellect. "So, instead of processing everything simultaneously, you're creating a priority hierarchy?" "Exactly," Elijah smiled, a flicker of the professor he once was breaking through. "Critical systems aren't about solving every problem at once. They're about solving the right problems, in the right order." The young engineers drifted closer, drawn to the clarity and authority in his explanations. Even skeptics took notes. Clayton noticed, frowning, stepping forward with a deliberate interruption. "While this classroom session is nice, we have work to do." Elijah ignored the bait. "Ms. Mitchell is learning quickly. She has instincts, trust them, even when everyone else doubts you." Moments later, he paused, distant, and Zoe gently asked, "Remember MIT?" Elijah nodded, opening his worn notebook to reveal hand-drawn diagrams from decades past. "I was working on adaptive learning when AI was still just science fiction." Elijah set the computer aside and picked up a pencil, a faint smile crossing his face. "Old school," he murmured. For the next 3 hours, he sketched methodically, transforming the complicated algorithm into a stripped-down, elegant framework. Only printed circuit diagrams and basic simulation tools, those Clayton hadn't thought to restrict, sat before him. Where the engineering team had layered complication upon complication, trying to predict every possible variable, Elijah reduced the system to its essence. "The elegance is in simplicity," he explained to Zoe, who watched intently. "They're trying to plan for every eventuality. Impossible. Instead, build a system that learns, adapts, and protects itself." By mid-afternoon, the solution was complete. A single, brilliant line of code that not only resolved the recursion problem but optimized the decision-making framework entirely. Elijah turned to Zoe, calm and confident. "Ready to test?" Her eyes gleamed. "Absolutely." Clayton had ordered the simulation to run on the main lab display, a clear attempt to make a public spectacle of Elijah's potential failure. Engineers gathered, whispers buzzing with anticipation. Zoe loaded the code, and the virtual vehicle sprang to life, navigating complex, unpredictable road conditions with fluid, intuitive precision. Hesitation, overcompensation, catastrophic errors, all vanished. When the simulation faced the final emergency obstacle scenario, one that had consistently caused crashes, the vehicle responded flawlessly. Spontaneous applause erupted in the lab. "He did it," Wilson Gardner muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. "One day, one single day." Clayton's face was a mixture of relief and fury. The problem had been solved, yes, but by the one person he had tried to restrict. He forced a tight smile. Initial results looked promising. Of course, extensive validation is still required. Meanwhile, Zoe slipped away for a quick coffee and overheard IT technicians whispering. "Riker wants the access logs, specifically if Hayes touched anything beyond the test environment." "Why? He just saved the project." "Above my pay grade. But Riker's email said, 'Don't give him full access. Let him fail.'" Zoe's jaw tightened. Back in the lab, Clayton paraded his team as though the victory was collective, never acknowledging Elijah. Zoe approached, voice steady but sharp. "Mr. Riker, a word." Clayton followed, his impatience barely masked. "What is it, intern? I'm busy." Zoe met his gaze. "I know you deliberately restricted Mr. Hayes' access. You wanted him to fail." Clayton's eyes hardened. "Careful, Ms. Mitchell. Those are serious accusations against your CEO." She produced the email, watching alarm flicker across his features before he masked it. "Remember your place. Interns here rarely have promising careers after challenging executives." Zoe's voice didn't waver. "He fixed your algorithm anyway. Pencil and paper. What does that say about who truly belongs here?" Meanwhile, Elijah spoke with engineers, explaining his methodology with clarity and patience. The atmosphere shifted. No longer invisible, he was now a mentor, a peer, a source of insight. When Zoe relayed Clayton's sabotage, Elijah's calm acceptance flickered, replaced by quiet dignity tinged with disappointment. "I think I'm done here," he said softly. Zoe's eyes widened. "But you solved it. Everyone can see what you're capable of." He shook his head. "They don't want me here. Not really." Gathering his notebook and a few personal items, he moved toward the exit. Engineers tried to stop him to understand, but he passed with polite determination. In the elevator, Wilson Gardner called out, "Dr. Hayes, where are you going?" Elijah offered a small smile. "Just, Elijah is fine. I'm going home." The doors closed. Silence filled the lab. 3 days passed. Elijah's small apartment in South Chicago remained empty, mail piling up unnoticed. At Langston Innovations, his absence left a void larger than anyone expected for a maintenance worker. But Zoe refused to let it go. She spent 2 days compiling access logs, emails, simulation results, a complete record of both Elijah's brilliance and Clayton's obstruction. On Wednesday, she made her move. Using her access to the development environment, she built a simplified but fully functional version of the vehicle's navigation system. At noon, during the cafeteria's busiest hour, she went live. "My name is Zoe Mitchell, engineering intern at Langston Innovations," she began, calm but confident. 3 days ago, Elijah Hayes solved a critical algorithm problem our team had struggled with for months. I'm going to show you his solution in action." For 15 minutes, Zoe demonstrated the before and after, explaining in simple terms why Elijah's approach was revolutionary. She never named Clayton, yet the evidence was undeniable. "This man wasn't an executive or even an engineer here," she concluded. "He was our janitor. And now he's gone because some would rather bury genius than admit they didn't recognize it." The stream exploded online. Thousands shared it immediately. Tech blogs framed it as a modern David and Goliath story. CEO tries to bury janitor's genius fix. Black maintenance worker solves unsolvable tech problem. The janitor who outsmarted Silicon Valley. By evening, mainstream outlets picked it up. Financial analysts questioned Langston's leadership. Investors demanded emergency meetings. The stock fell 8% after hours. Clayton's sleek office became a crisis war room. "Clayton, this is a PR disaster," Margaret Baker, board head, said. "3 major investors are threatening to pull out." He argued, "He fixed one algorithm. It's being blown out of proportion." "Because he is a genius," another board member interjected. 4 engineering professors contacted me today. Hayes was decades ahead in adaptive systems. One called him the most innovative mind of his generation. Margaret's voice hardened. "The board is calling a vote of no confidence, Clayton. Prepare a statement." Meanwhile, Elijah sat in his modest living room, watching the storm unfold on his old television. He'd returned late from Milwaukee, having spent days with his nephew Jameer, and the sudden spotlight was deeply uncomfortable. Messages piled up, most ignored, but one from Zoe caught his attention. "I'm sorry if I made things worse, but you deserved recognition, and they deserved accountability." Before he could respond, a knock at the door. A courier handed an envelope from Vector Dynamics, a rising San Francisco tech firm. Inside was a brief but tantalizing letter, an invitation to speak at the West Coast Tech Summit as a featured innovator. All expenses paid, no obligations, just a stage to share his story and insights. There, parked curbside, gleamed the silver prototype vehicle, the same one he had fixed that morning years ago, now shining like a jewel against the familiar backdrop of his modest neighborhood. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered, whispering in admiration, marveling, at a car that seemed to belong in a museum rather than among the row of working-class homes. Elijah's phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. He answered. "Mr. Hayes?" a woman's voice said. "Margaret Baker, chairwoman of Langston Innovations. I hope our gift arrived safely." "It did," he replied, still absorbing the reality of owning a multi-million-dollar prototype. "Consider it the first installment of our apology," she continued. "The board would also like to discuss compensation for your solution and, if you are willing, a more formal role. Moving forward." Elijah's reply was measured. "I appreciate that, Ms. Baker, but I'm not sure I'm ready to rejoin corporate America." Her voice softened. "Perhaps consulting on your own terms? The door is open whenever you choose." Elijah stood beside the car, its reflective surface catching the late afternoon sun, mirroring the quiet streets and the eyes of neighborhood children pressing close. "Is that really yours, Mr. Hayes?" a boy named Danny asked, wide-eyed. "Apparently," Elijah said with a small, bemused smile. "How'd you get it?" He paused, then answered simply, "By fixing what others couldn't." 2 weeks later, Elijah found himself in a sleek San Francisco hotel, the hum of excitement backstage mixing with his own steady heartbeat. The West Coast Tech Summit had become his stage, thanks to Catherine Barnes, CEO of Vector Dynamics, and a longtime rival of Clayton Riker. Zoe had warned him during their calls, "She's using you to embarrass Clayton." Elijah had agreed, quietly adding, "But she's giving me a platform. I'll use it." As the host introduced him, Elijah felt a calm settle over him. The auditorium was packed. Executives, engineers, media, all eager to see the janitor who had outsmarted Silicon Valley. Stepping onto the stage, the applause was deafening. He waited for it to subside, then began, voice clear and deliberate. 20 years ago, I lost everything for speaking the truth about unsafe technology. Today, I'm here because the truth always finds a way out. For 30 minutes, he spoke, not with anger or bitterness, but with the quiet authority of someone who had witnessed the industry's peaks and depths. The mind doesn't age, he said near the end. It doesn't care what uniform you wear or what title you hold. It just needs someone to believe in it again. The standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. Back at Langston Innovations, the boardroom had turned into a storm. Clayton Riker was placed on administrative leave pending investigation, whispers of forced resignation spreading. Zoe, meanwhile, was offered a permanent role in R&D with a mandate to create a mentorship program for non-traditional talent. Everyone deserves to be seen, she told the HR team, launching Beyond the Badge, a recruitment initiative targeting maintenance and support staff. Engineers who had witnessed Elijah's brilliance volunteered to teach workshops. The program quickly gained traction, and Margaret Baker and the board offered their full backing, transforming a PR disaster into a cultural shift. The day after, Elijah's speech went viral. Clayton was formally asked to resign. Public statements cited leadership failures and ethical violations. Privately, he was confronted with evidence of sabotage and systemic discrimination. In his place, the board promoted from within, choosing Dr. Lisa Harmon, a respected engineering director known for ethical leadership and technical excellence. Meanwhile, offers flooded in for Elijah from every major tech company. Vector Dynamics led the charge, offering him the CTO role with full creative control, a team of 50 engineers, and stock options worth millions. Yet standing on his hotel balcony the evening before, he was to decide, overlooking the Golden Bay. Elijah hesitated. Corporate America had rejected him once. Now it begged for his return. They offered me the CTO position, he told Zoe over the phone. Full control, a huge team, stock options. That's amazing. Are you taking it? She asked. He watched the sun melt into the horizon. I've done the 100-hour weeks, the politics, the endless meetings. I'm not sure I want to go back to that life. Silence hung between them, full of unspoken possibilities. So, Zoe finally asked, gently, what do you want? Elijah let the question settle. For the first time in decades, he could choose. Not out of obligation, but because the world was finally ready to see him as he truly was. I want to build things at my own pace, Elijah said quietly, watching the San Francisco skyline fade into twilight. Zoe's voice came through the phone a moment later. Langston has offered you a permanent R&D position. They're also asking if you'd consider consulting. No title, no politics. Just tackling the problems that interest you. Elijah let the words hang in the air, a small smile tugging at his lips. Sounds tempting. I'll think about it. He hung up and picked up the key fob for the prototype vehicle, now shipped to San Francisco for his visit. The sleek car sat, like a trophy, a symbol of recognition long denied, proof that his work had value. The next morning, instead of flying home, Elijah slipped behind the wheel. He programmed the navigation system to his old Chicago neighborhood, not the route, just the destination. He engaged the autonomous drive. Perfect. Let's go home, he whispered. The vehicle glided into traffic, humming softly beneath him. 20 years invisible, and now his algorithms were guiding a car across the country, shaping thousands of decisions every second, all without anyone ever needing to know his name. San Francisco receded behind him as the highway stretched east, and Elijah felt a quiet satisfaction. He wasn't running away. He was moving forward on his own terms. He took 4 days for the journey, savoring the scenic detours, stopping in small towns and national parks he had always wanted to see. The prototype's AI adapted to his habits and preferences with every mile. When Chicago's skyline finally appeared, sunlight glinting off Lake Michigan, Elijah felt the pull of home. But he didn't head straight to his apartment. He drove first to the cemetery where his brother Marcus rested. The modest headstone read simply, Marcus Hayes, 1972 to 2001, beloved brother, brilliant mind. Elijah knelt, brushing away fallen leaves. You wouldn't believe the month I've had, he said softly. People are listening again. That evening, back in his apartment, surrounded by boxes of old journals and technical papers, Elijah revisited the work that had once defined him. For the first time in decades, he let himself remember and rebuild. His phone chimed with a text from Zoe. How was the drive? Office feels weird without you fixing things. He smiled and typed back, Drive was good. Reacquainting myself with old ideas. How's the new job? Challenging. Board approved my mentorship program. When are you coming? In to consult? Elijah hadn't given Langston a definitive answer yet. Part of him still hesitated to step back into that world, even on his own terms. Before he could reply, another notification arrived, an email from an address he hadn't seen in more than 20 years, NathanVectorSystems.com. The subject line, Overdue Apology. Elijah's hand trembled as he opened it. Nathan Kessler, his brightest MIT student, once his trusted colleague, later the one who had testified against him in the whistleblowing investigation. Elijah, the email began, I saw your speech at the summit. 20 years too late, but you were right, and I was a coward. I've carried this shame for decades. I'm in Chicago next week. If you're willing, I'd like to meet. No agenda, just a mentor owed the truth. Memories flooded back. Nathan had been brilliant, the partner in his earliest AI experiments, the one who shared his vision of technology to improve lives. Then the military drone contract happened. Elijah had discovered critical safety flaws, warned them, and Nathan had testified against him out of fear. Now, sitting at a small Lincoln Park cafe, Nathan waited. His hair was streaked with silver, his face lined but distinguished. They exchanged awkward smiles. You look well, Nathan said. 20 years of work and keeping fit, Elijah replied without rancor. Nathan broke the silence. I was 28, terrified of losing my first job, convinced by others that you were overreacting. I was wrong. They were wrong. People died because of it. Elijah studied him quietly. Why now? Nathan sighed. Seeing you speak with the integrity you had back then, it broke something in me. I couldn't hide anymore. He placed a business card on the table. Executive VP of Research, Vector Systems. I want to make you an offer. Senior Technical. Advisor, your own lab, your own team, complete autonomy. Elijah turned the card over, weighing the gravity of the proposal. Quite a step up from janitor, he murmured. Nathan leaned in, eyes earnest. Not charity, self-interest. You were 20 years ahead then. I can only imagine what you've been thinking while the rest of us played catch-up. You could have real impact, recognition, resources. Elijah considered, feeling the familiar thrill of solving a complex problem. And yet, something felt off, like a misaligned circuit in a perfect design. I need time, he said. Nathan nodded. Take all the time you need, the offer won't expire. The following day, Elijah returned to MIT. He hadn't been on campus since his abrupt departure decades ago. He expected to be noticed, maybe confronted, but he was just another visitor. The engineering building had been renovated, yet its soul remained. He slipped into the back of a lecture hall mid-class, watching students discuss adaptive learning systems in transportation. The fundamental challenge, the professor said, is designing AI that makes human-like judgments without hesitation. Elijah smiled. He had written nearly identical words in 1994. As students presented their projects, he felt bittersweet pride. These young minds were exploring the very questions he had once posed. They would never know he had been here, quietly shaping the foundation, but in some small, lasting way, his legacy lived on. Eventually, Elijah wandered the halls to the robotics lab, a faint smile on his face, ready to begin building again. Not for recognition, not for fame, but for the love of creation. Tidelf, a janitor, was mopping nearby, keys jingling at his belt. The same sound Elijah had once worn at Langston. "Mind if I look around?" Elijah asked. The man shrugged. "Just don't touch nothing. They get picky about their robots." Elijah nodded, gratitude in his eyes, and drifted through the lab, absorbing the hum of innovation. Students were scattered among workstations, prototypes in every stage of completion. In the corner, a team focused on a small self-navigating vehicle, a miniature echo of Langston's prototype. "Excuse me," one student called, noticing Elijah studying their project. "Are you a professor?" "No," Elijah replied with a gentle smile. "Just someone interested in what you're building." The student's face lit up, launching into an animated explanation of their navigation system. Elijah asked a few questions, carefully measured, revealing knowledge beyond the average visitor. Within minutes, 3 more students had joined, drawn by his insight. "You really know your stuff," one said, wide-eyed. "Do you work in the field?" "I used to," Elijah answered simply. Driving home that evening, Elijah felt a spark he hadn't felt in years. The student's enthusiasm reminded him of the pure joy of engineering, the thrill of solving problems that truly mattered, untainted by politics or prestige. It wasn't ambition that stirred in him. It was purpose, the quiet reaffirmation of why he had fallen in love with building things in the first place. His journey took him next to Milwaukee, where his nephew Jameer was, finishing his senior year of high school. The boy has your eyes, Elijah thought, seeing the same quick intelligence that ran through the Hayes family. At a local diner, Jameer leaned forward, voice buzzing with excitement. "Everyone at school is talking about you, Uncle Elijah. They say you're some kind of genius who's been hiding all this time." Elijah shook his head, a blush of embarrassment coloring his cheeks. Jameer's grin widened. "The engineering forums are full of people analyzing your work. They talk about you like a ghost or a legend." He leaned closer, conspiratorial. "One of my teachers even asked if you were really my uncle." "And what did you tell him?" Elijah asked. "That you taught me how to rebuild an engine when I was 10 and that you're the smartest person I know," Jameer said, eyes shining. "But I didn't tell him the whole truth. You're the reason I applied to engineering programs." Elijah felt a lump rise in his throat, a mix of pride and quiet disbelief. Jameer's excitement didn't stop there. He slid an envelope across the table. Inside was an acceptance letter from MIT, the very program where Elijah had once taught. "I was going to keep it a surprise," Jameer admitted. "But then you got famous." Elijah read the letter twice, his chest swelling with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. "Your father would have been so proud," he said softly. "I know," Jameer replied, eyes solemn. Then came the question that cut deeper than any congratulations. "All these companies calling you now, are you going to take any of those offers?" Elijah hesitated. "I'm considering it," he admitted. Jameer tapped the MIT letter gently. "Because you're not just building machines, Uncle Elijah. You're building a legacy. This is your second chance to do things right, to create things that help people without compromise." Elijah looked at his nephew, the words sinking in. This wasn't just about recognition or money anymore. It was about purpose, impact, and finally, doing it on his own terms. Upcoming Nexert part.